Hey, welcome everybody to TNPA Career Day 2026. And thank you for joining us. My name is Shelby Truxon, and I'm the Vice President of Internship Experience here at the Nonprofit Alliance, also known as TNPA. And we have an amazing lineup of industry and career development professionals who you can read more about in the speaker page that I will post in the chat for you. Today, you'll learn how to build a career in the nonprofit sector, working for the causes you care about the most, including industry trends and challenges to look out for, practical tips for your job prep or preparation, and managing your mental health and wellness during this stage of your career development. So we'll first start with a live conversation, then follow with a series of recorded interviews and town hall discussions that we'll have throughout the webinar. So to avoid distractions, we are asking everyone to remain on mute during the speaker segments, but highly encourage you to answer the town hall questions that will be in the chat box and to share your thoughts throughout the discussion using the chat box. And then after each segment, we'll then open the floor for you to unmute and share your feedback as part of the town hall discussions. So you'll be able to have the discussions throughout, just in different forms as we go through each segment. And so some of our speakers are also or will be here to chat with you in the chat and answer questions and to answer out loud as well. And so if possible, we would also love to see your lovely faces if you're able to. And so, especially if you're answering a question out loud, we do ask that you'll turn your camera on so we can see you and chat with you that way. So with that said, I do want to get started with our very first speaker today, and that is Ann Hollingsworth, our VP of Government Affairs here at TNPA, and she will speak have a conversation with me for you all on the political landscape for today's nonprofits. So, welcome, Ann, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for organizing this, Shelby. Good morning, everyone. Great to see you.
Of course, of course. So I am going to start with my first question for you. And that is, with the current political environment for nonprofits, what challenges are you seeing and actively working on in your role as the VP of Government Affairs at the Nonprofit Alliance?
Well, thank you, Shelby. 2025 was a challenging year for the nonprofit sector on a couple of fronts that I want to highlight to all of you. First of all, in the early part of 2025, we had the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, begin some pretty drastic slashes to federal workers and federal funding. That was targeting higher ed and healthcare grants. That was targeting international assistance and international aid, the decimation of the U.S. Agency for International Development. And all of this was happening at a time where it was a question of whether, some of these cuts were going to be permanent and whether it was going to be something that was going to last. And so the nonprofit sector was, had to activate quite quickly in, some necessary staffing cuts and layoffs due to some of their programming that had been cut. But also they had to quickly shift to sort of activate, new donors and new approaches. So if for those that were relying on government funding, looking elsewhere in the philanthropic space for what they could actually help to fill some of their funding gaps. So, all of this happened at a time when I think nonprofits were still trying to get their bearings. And then, as you will recall, we had the longest government shutdown we've ever had in the United States, 43 days. And so what that meant was nonprofits, the impact of those earlier funding cuts was kind of compounded because communities had to go to nonprofits, to those trusted nonprofits that had been their communities for years and decades, to help support services during a government shutdown. And so all of this was something that we at the Nonprofit Alliance took very seriously to highlight, and we did multiple, messaging and blogs and media reports to talk about that critical role that nonprofits are playing. So the funding piece is one, and then the second thing is the additional targeting of the nonprofit sector. And so in 2025, the Nonprofit Alliance was working on a couple of different fronts on that piece. One was monitoring congressional action, and so in the past, there's been some targeting of nonprofits that have been very focused on, as an example, the immigration space. So how immigration programming and funding is allocated, hearings that would, question some of those that are very that would question where that funding is going. But what happened in 2025 was multiple committee jurisdictions were looking at nonprofit programming in a way that was absolutely, in our view, unwarranted. So the unwarranted scrutiny of nonprofits was looking at programming not just on immigration, not just on international programming, but on LGBTQ plus, on DEI initiatives, and quite frankly, anything that some of the members on the committee might have had an issue with U.S. taxpayer dollars going to support it. So we're tracking that while also tracking additional threats to the nonprofit sector under the administration through executive order. So there was a joint task force created that was very vague in how they would be looking at a broader sort of range of actors that would include nonprofits. And so we were raising a lot of questions in the media of what this would mean. And so I think those are kind of the two key fronts as we lead into 2026 in this midterm election year, that we not only are continuing to work on and highlight, but has laid, I think, a very strong foundation for us in some of the challenges that we're facing today.
Yeah, a lot going on, especially during these times. So I'm glad to be a part of an organization who's on it for sure. But that also reminds me of all the other organizations and nonprofits who are also stepping in, trying to counter the things that are going on. So how have you seen other nonprofits in general, like in the sector, how have you seen them step in recently with when it comes to all the challenges that we're facing?
Yeah, Shelby, thank you. And first of all, I just want to emphasize this is happening every single day. And, we want to highlight not just, the usual suspects of healthcare and food aid, but sort of the broader nonprofit sector in support of legal assistance, arts, all of those things is just a fabric of our community. So I just want to start there. But I think the specific example that comes to mind is going back to that government shutdown where we had federal workers standing in line for food aid at food pantries that had already been hit very hard by the government funding cuts, and by the SNAP food cuts, which was in the press a lot at the time. And what happened was, they were like, we're gonna activate, and we're gonna activate our donors. We're gonna get out to the press. We're gonna tell the stories of the needs of, the range of people that are coming to the food banks right now. And there was some really successful fundraising and media strategies out of that, to help elevate the incredible work of nonprofits, but also to activate donors at a really critical time. In other words, who else was going to step in during a government shutdown, aside from that nonprofit community base in these communities? So I think that's a really excuse me, a really important one. But also just really emphasizing, the ways that nonprofits are helping each other, supporting each other. There's many coalitions in the nonprofit space that are sharing information, that are talking about, where there's potentially a threat or where there's an opportunity for all of us to work collectively and collaboratively. And I think that's really important to highlight as well.
Yeah, awesome. We really are part of a really great sector, and it speaks to the need of the nonprofit sector in general, why we are needed, but especially when we are going through times like this where there are just certain services that maybe the government can't step in on, or even the private sector might not be able to serve. And so that's what we're here to do. Um, and so my last question is what are some career paths for students to consider as they join in on the work that we're doing in our communities and in the world through the nonprofit sector?
Um, yeah, thanks. And Shelby, this is my favorite question. So let's dive in because I get to reflect on the earlier part of my career, starting in nonprofit internships.
Yay.
And I love talking about that. So first of all, I think the two main points I want to highlight, first of all, is what those nonprofit internships can do for you. And yes, my case study is a few years ago, and we won't say how many years ago. But I really emphasized my first internship when I was in college and undergrad was the Hollings Cancer Center at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. And so, what I was able to do was work in a fundraising development office for 2 years. And while I really enjoyed it, and it was just an incredible work experience, for me, it also helped shift the direction of, I don't think fundraising is where I want to focus my career. And so I always start with that example of like such incredible experience, but it also, these internships help shape the direction of what you really want to do and maybe sort of change an assumption of what you thought that you would potentially go into and how that sort of helps make your decision. The second main point for all of you to keep in mind is, the nonprofit sector, I think, has a little bit of almost a too much focus on programming when you're thinking about careers. So it's very much sort of like what kind of programmatic deliverable does this organization do? And that's really important. Of course, when you're passionate about an issue and you are driven to that, that is absolutely important. But when you're thinking broader about your career path, it really is necessary, and I've been in the nonprofit space for 20 plus years, to really acknowledge all of the areas that it takes to get a nonprofit organization working. So it's not just program, even though they do incredible work. It is administrative support. It is, HR support. It is, legal assistance. So if you want to be a lawyer, you can do that in the nonprofit sector as well. If you, want to do like, broader sort of like media engagement, there's really great opportunities right now, specifically in that space for the nonprofit sector. Nonprofits are still trying to, quite frankly, really figure out and maximize the social media space of how they can do that well and responsibly while, raising their brand, while also, aligning with their fundraising goals. And so I think particularly the media and external messaging is really important. And, I'll just close by saying, there's a lot of opportunities that you can see, I think, within the nonprofit sort of sector space that, looks directly into community relationships. And that can come in many forms. So, your earlier internships can directly sort of lead into that direction of a career of looking at partnerships, looking at coalition work, looking at, if you don't want to do advocacy and policy, looking at how you sort of build relationships and cultivate relationships for the betterment of the organization. And there's a huge value add to that, and just wanted to highlight that as well. Finally, I just want to highlight something that we started last year, which is something called Owning Your Value. And it's just something for you guys to look at if you have time, but it's really a way for us to help nonprofits talk about the amazing work that they do. And it's not tied to legislation, it's not tied to the administration or any rhetoric around that. It's really about owning the incredible work nonprofits are doing every day on the numbers of people they employ, the programs they support, how long they've been in these communities. And, for us, it's really about everyone getting out there and talking about the incredible work that they do. And so that's why I was tying in, the media comms piece, of course, being I think really critical in that.
So I do want to thank you, Anne, for being here doing this with us. Very helpful. So thank you again for doing this with us.
You're very welcome, Shelby. It was a pleasure to see you all. Best of luck to you.
So we're seeing several big trends shaping the nonprofit sector right now. First, technology, especially AI, is transforming how many nonprofits operate. Organizations are using AI for things like donor management, communications, data analysis, and even sometimes program design. And so students entering the workforce should be pretty comfortable working with basic data literacy, using AI tools ethically, which I know is a big deal right now, and understanding how technology can streamline mission-driven work rather than replace the human elements that are present. So that's one big trend. I think a second one would be that nonprofits are increasingly navigating a very highly political and polarized funding environment right now. Issues that were once seen largely as bipartisan, including areas such as education, immigration, environmental sustainability even, now come with a lot more scrutiny. So this means nonprofits are going to be looking for and need employees who can understand the larger policy contexts of an issue. They can communicate with a wide variety of stakeholders for the nonprofit, and they know how to operate with diplomacy these days. That's very, very important. Lastly, I would say the sector is facing increased expectations around impact measurement, equity, and even community-driven design, so to speak. I think funders generally want proof that programs are working and that communities want to be partners in shaping them. And I think having tools in place to help measure those impacts is very, very important. And to that end, I think to prepare, students can start to become and build comfort with data tools from basic Excel to GIS and basic AI platforms. I think all three of those areas would be a really good start. I think gaining some experience while you're still in school in community engagement and intercultural communication and building those communications and interpersonal skills is going to be valued by any employer. And I think also generally staying informed about policy issues as they pertain to issues that are important to them really helps an employer see how a student is connected to their mission's interests or to the interest of their organization or their mission. And I think that's a skill that students can demonstrate. Finally, as I would tell anybody entering the nonprofit world or any other sector for that matter, taking on experiential learning opportunities, internships, even small ones or even remote ones, definitely shows initiative on your part and exposure to real nonprofit challenges. Don't let payment for that internship stop you. Oftentimes schools and colleges have programs to help you meet your financial needs if the internship is unpaid. So exploring those with your career center is also a very wise idea. So I would say nonprofit employers consistently look for a few core skills within their entry-level hires. First and foremost, I'm going to say that communication is number one, both written and oral or verbal. This includes basics like the ability to write a clear email, summarize complex issues, drafting grant writing paragraphs, or presenting information to a team, even collaborating within a team. I think these are all very, very important and can't be understated, especially in smaller nonprofits where there tends to be a lot of wearing across many different areas of responsibility. So students can build this skill by taking, obviously, writing intensive academic courses, joining student organizations on campus, pursuing leadership positions, which would require motivating others and working as a part of a leadership team, or volunteering to draft materials for even a campus group that's just getting off the ground, but needs some formalized documentation to be recognized by campus. These are all ways to sort of build those communication skills while you're still in school. Secondly, I would say nonprofits value project management and organizational skills. Okay, and these are also very transferable from one place in your professional life to another. This doesn't mean, students getting a formal certification, although that can help if that's something that the student is into, but rather being able to juggle deadlines, plan tasks, assign responsibilities, and really keep a program moving from beginning to end. Students can demonstrate this, and I often suggest that they do, by leading campus groups or initiatives, organizing events, planning events on campus, or managing group projects within their academic program. And I know not everybody always loves group projects, but that is a really good place to sort of test your leadership skills and your ability to collaborate and work well with others. Third, I would say data and analytical skills are increasingly important as you look at skills that nonprofit employers want. Even basic familiarity with things like Excel or data visualization or basic surveying, those can go a long way. Students can build these skills, again, through academics and some of their course assignments, no matter what your major is. There are online certifications that are also available. And as everyone should know, experiential learning opportunities where there's a data subset to your responsibilities, i.e. in an internship, is also going to be a place where you can potentially manage data sets or surveying, or sort of cut your teeth into data management skill sets. And finally, the last skill that I think employers would really want to see, and I think this in some ways is more important even than the transferable ones I mentioned already. Nonprofits are going to look for empathy. They're going to look for cultural competence, and they're going to look for adaptability. The work that nonprofits do at its core, and what makes it so special and so differentiated from many other sectors, is that it is mission-driven and also fast-paced, so that employers who are at those organizations value people who can listen well, work across differences, and stay flexible as priorities change based on external factors influencing that organization. Mission statements exist for a reason. And so when you're looking at nonprofits, pay close attention to how those are detailed on the organization's webpage, and make sure that you convey that you share a similar purpose. It'll get you a long way in the interview. So if you're interested in the nonprofit sector, but don't know really where to begin, I would say the best first step is to identify an issue you care about. And I know this sounds basic, but the nonprofit world is vast. Education, the environment, youth programs, women's rights, global development, homelessness. These are all issues that you can choose to focus on, and others that I'm not mentioning. And a passion for a particular cause will help you narrow your path. So doing some exploration there through experiential learning, et cetera, is a great way to begin thinking about that. Which brings me to my second point, actually. Getting exposure through low lift opportunities, like volunteering for a local organization, attending events or workshops, taking on a small project-based internship. These are all ways to, outside of the classroom, gain real-world experiential learning opportunities that are going to help you decide what you like, and more importantly, also what you don't like. Both of these outcomes are helpful to figuring out exactly what the next step in your career is going to be. So even 5 hours a month is going to help you understand how nonprofits operate and what roles you might enjoy. So think about getting out of the classroom and into the workspace to gain an understanding of what issue you really identify and care the most about. Third, I'm going to toot my own horn a little bit here and say that you should use the resources that are available to you. So career services at your home institution, alumni networks, faculty connections, student organizations. These are all part of the higher education environment that will allow you to talk to just 2 or 3 professionals in the field through informational interviews that can provide you clarity very, very quickly. Folks within these networks are going to be able to connect you to people doing this work, and taking some time out of your day to ask really critical questions to people who are doing what you might want to do one day is a wonderful way to find out, again, how appropriate that is for you in the future. Lastly, I would say that I think there's a rush by students to figure out what they're going to do all in one day. Okay, and this is not realistic. This is not what's going to happen. Many people enter nonprofits, or any career for that matter, through roles like communications or research or fundraising or program directing or community outreach, administration, and then move on to specialized work over time. Most people have between 40 or 50 years of their working life. And while I know that sounds ominous, it should emphasize to you the fact that everybody's going to have their own path into doing the work that they find valuable, and figuring out where that starts and where it ends is part of the fun of the journey. Lastly, I would say track what energizes you. The nonprofit sector rewards curiosity, initiative, and people who are committed to learning and are able to show that. So if you follow what generally interests you and you build small experiences along the way, you're going to naturally find a path that fits your values, skills, interests, and abilities. And that can be an exciting thing when you're seeing that come to fruition. So take your time and realize that everyone has a unique path to do what they want to do professionally.
Okay, everybody, we now have our next set of speakers. They are amazing. They're from Towson University, Chaz Walters and Rosemary Riel. Welcome, both of you, to Career Day 2026. Glad to have you. Yeah.
Thank you.
So let's jump in. I have a couple of questions for you both. Chaz, I will start with you. If you could just talk more about what information should students gather about potential employers when searching for jobs in the nonprofit sector, and include any tips for how to go about it and where they should look.
Absolutely. Working in the nonprofit sector, it is quite different than your for-profit, sort of run-of-the-mill, so to speak, organizations. Where I like to start and where I would recommend students start is looking at an organization's mission and vision, right? Is this something that you can connect to as a student, and analyze your own values, right? Can you connect to, saving puppies, right? Most people can, if that's something that you're really, really passionate about, yeah, it could be a really, really great fit. But if you're not so passionate about, whatever subject, you might find it hard to connect with an organization and therefore work for that organization. So that would definitely be my first one. My second tip, or certainly something students should look out for, would be the size of the organization. I like to say nonprofits in many respects are like fingerprints. Like they're so different, right? They really, really are. Even though they might seem similar, some of them are very, very different. And I think size has a lot to do with that. So, in my past, I worked for, at the time, a medium-sized nonprofit. So we had, for example, a bona fide HR department and a volunteer coordinator and a CEO and things like that. So it very much structured or mirrored rather the structure of a for-profit entity. But then you have much smaller organizations that, hey, it's kind of the mom and pop of the nonprofit world. Like there may be 2 or 3 people kind of running the show, and the rest might be volunteers. So should you become, one of those 2 to 3 people that are being paid and that have a job to do, your role, the amount of hats you wear, let's say, could vary wildly depending on the size of that organization. So just something to keep in mind. It's not necessarily good or bad, certainly, but it's just something that as a student and as you're looking to get your foot in the door, go ahead and take a look, what size is right for you. And then the last, I would really consider looking at, again, I know I mentioned that mission and sort of like the impact of that organization, but, look at the culture, look at the values of that organization as well. I think that is so, so important. And many times it's sort of overlooked. I feel as if sometimes students can kind of get wrapped up in the name of maybe a certain nonprofit or maybe their impact, right? Without really kind of peeling back the layers, looking at the culture, right? We folks in nonprofits, we work hard. It's a hardworking industry, so look at the culture of that. Is there time off? Do you get some vacation hours if that's something that's important to you? And does the organization function as a team, right? Does it feel cohesive? Is it a culture of learning? Is it a culture of togetherness? When you're in that type of environment. So I think really taking your time, looking at the culture, and if you're like, well, how do I do that? I can't just, hey, can I shadow you for a day? No, but why don't you go volunteer for the organization? I think that's a great way to look at and sort of kind of get a feel for that culture and what that's like. Go and volunteer, maybe volunteer more than once. You can kind of get to know some of the folks that are organizing that, how the organization stays organized. I think that's also very important. Do they have all their ducks in a row? Is your experience as a volunteer, did you have a good experience rather? So I think those are a few different things that I would look at when considering entering the nonprofit space, but more importantly, thinking about and considering which nonprofit could be the right match for you. So that's looking at that mission and their impact. Is it something that you align with? Looking at how big or small is this organization, because those two things can vary wildly, and your experience will be different at a big versus a small organization. And then last, look at that culture. Look at the values of said organization, and take the time to volunteer. I think that's going to be your best bet in figuring out sort of what's a good fit for you. So yeah, that would be sort of my tips and advice.
Awesome. Really good tips. And I appreciate you mentioning something that I think is unique to the nonprofit sector is that you can volunteer for organization, and that, allows you to meet is another way, like just to meet the people who work there a little bit, get your name and your face out there a little bit. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that that's great. And it kind of leads into the next question for you. Like, what are some of the most common skill sets that nonprofit employers are looking for from entry level employees who are just starting out? And any tips for how they can go about developing those skills?
Yeah, here, I've took some notes here in my little notepad. I'm definitely going to lean on the NACE career competencies here. So NACE, National Association for Colleges and Employers, they're the ones, this organization, here at Towson University's Career Center, we utilize their framework for a lot of what we do. So I definitely want to lean on them for this portion. And quite frankly, these are things that I've heard interacting with employers as well. So I know I'm looking at you, Rosemary. I know I'm gonna kind of mess up the order here, but I have sort of a top three here. So quickly, the top three: critical thinking skills, teamwork, and communication. So those are going to be the top three skills that employers are really looking for. And I think, even personally think, if a student were to master these skills and in a work setting, I mean, you're going to set yourself up for success. So starting super quick with critical thinking, I mean, quite frankly, can you solve problems, right? That's probably going to be the number one thing. That's why somebody's going to be bringing you in to an organization and to an office or what have you. Can you solve this problem for us? And if you kind of zoom out for a second, that's why a lot of these organizations exist. Can you solve a problem? Can you identify a gap? Can you fill that gap in whatever their mission is, right? So that's definitely going to be number one. Number two, teamwork. I mentioned earlier about the culture, right? Is it a culture of togetherness? What does that look like? I mean, I feel as if most of the students in the audience, I know you probably have dreaded that group project, right? Maybe you had that one person that maybe didn't do maybe what they were supposed to do. But on the other hand, many of you probably had great experience with group projects, right? Where everyone's doing their part. I think knowing how to work as a part of a team is going to be just critical. I mean, it's going to be such an amazing asset you can bring into any organization. And again, remember, as I said, when it comes to the varying sizes of these nonprofit organizations, whether it's something super large like I'm trying to think of a big one like Wounded Warrior, for example. They're a national brand. They have lots of different organizations all around the country. It's very big, but you're still going to be a part of a team there. You're still going to be reporting to someone maybe or what have you. You're still going to be a part of a team. Or if it's the mom and pop shop, the very small, very local nonprofits where, hey, it might be 2 or 3 of you, that is the team. So you're really going to need to know and have a great handle on those team working skills, how to lift others, how to highlight strengths and things of that nature. So teamwork being number 2. And the last but not least, communication. This goes way beyond just the nonprofit space. I mean, communication is key in just about anything you're going to do, academic related, certainly work related, but communication is so, so important. And, I'm not just talking right now, hey, sort of this oral communication, written communication as well. I mean, I can tell you, sometimes what we coach our students on is like, hey, this is an email, not a text message, So I think just something as small as that, that's all communication, and how do you communicate when there is a problem? When do you communicate that immediately? Do you try and solve it? Oh, didn't work. Now you're kind of backtracking, that sort of thing. So it's all about communication, how you present yourself. And I know I did not list this, but I would sort of link that to professionalism as well. I think even, with nonprofits being certainly different than your for-profit entities, and a lot of times they're a little more lax, I still think you do need to bring a degree of professionalism to that space. That way we can make sure, things are getting done, deadlines are getting met. I mean, you don't want to miss any grant deadlines, for example, or anything like that, right? So you want to make sure you have all your ducks in a row. So just to recap here, critical thinking, teamwork, and communication. Those are things you want to work on. And again, I'll sort of pump up our own career center here. I mean, those are things that we help students with all the time. You come in, of course, this would be for our TU students, but you come in, you make an appointment, and we're able to help you master these skills. And you can do that at pretty much all of your career centers, wherever you guys are from, students, go to your career centers. They know NACE, and I can almost bet my bottom dollar that they're also using these competencies as well. So it's just a great place to start. And last thing here, if for some reason you don't want to go to your career center or what have you, what I call YouTube University, I think that's a great place to start. You can type in NACE career competencies in YouTube, and you can bet that there's going to be lots of resources for you to take advantage of. So yeah, that's how I would answer that.
Yes, thankful for YouTube. I wish they had it when I was in school like that.
No doubt.
Thank you, Chaz. Rosemary, let's go to you. So, once the students have researched employers and they start working on their skills, there will come a point where hopefully they're ready to actually apply to some of these positions. And so, with so much competition out there, especially now, how can students make their resumes stand out?
All right. Thank you for the question, Shelby. I would say there is so much competition for sure. And number one, I would say believe in yourself. So I think sometimes, know your why and do your homework. So Chaz mentioned doing your homework, knowing the mission and the vision and the values of where you are applying to, those organizations, and knowing yourself, you'll be able to articulate in your resume your level of commitment to service. And so, you have a unique why. And so I think it's really important to be able to demonstrate your commitment to service. So you can highlight, again, your volunteer work, any community service, campus leadership, advocacy, tutoring, mentoring, fundraising, event planning. Those are the kinds of skills that you could be getting now and you can demonstrate in your resume. So if you are doing your homework, learning about those organizations, and read the job descriptions carefully. They want to know that you meet all of the minimum qualifications. So a resume is really to make sure that you are number one qualified. So you want those pieces, those keywords, those qualifications to jump out quickly. You don't want the reviewers, hiring managers to have to search your resume for that. So you want to keep your resume, very simple and clean and accessible to the readers, but then also tailoring it to the job description. So you want to make sure that if they described it as a program coordinating, that you use that same language and really utilize accomplishment-based bullet points. So oftentimes when we're looking at bullet points, they can see the role, but really they want to know more than just the position. They want to see the purpose. So you're going to want to describe how you did the work. So not that you just coordinated a campus food drive, but what were some of the accomplishments? That maybe you collected X number of foodstuffs for local families, or if you managed a social media campaign, to really highlight who that was for and the missions of those organizations. So you're going to want to be able to articulate in your resume sort of those transferable experiences that you have had, so they can start imagining you in the roles that they're asking for. So that's a lot of how you can really have your resume stand out, because all of your unique experiences put together is going to be enough for you to demonstrate your passion. I think if you're really pay a lot of attention to, again, the mission and the vision, so that you can really highlight your mission-driven experiences where you are now. That's, even if it's not paid, right? So again, you can't emphasize enough how doing some continuous volunteer, maybe, were you in a service learning course, and that you're really reflecting on those experiences and then articulating them into the skills that are transferable for that organization. So those are some of the key ways that the resume, if you keep it really tight and linked to the job descriptions and tailored, will help you move into that interviewing phase. So moving from the resume pile into the interview pile.
I love that. I love that. And I love that you added, to customize it to each position, and not sending out a blank template to everybody that's the same, because that really is what's going to make them stand out. So yeah, thank you for that. And then another question for you, so after they're working on the resume, and hopefully they get an interview, what type of interview questions should they expect, and how can they prepare for that or sharpen their interview skills?
Wonderful. So, anything that you put on your resume is totally, any interviewer can ask you about it. So, what you can do is you can actually utilize your resume. And again, thinking about your accomplishments, what are you most proud about? What are you most proud of? How does it demonstrate your values, your why? So being prepared to answer the question, what draws you to us? Oftentimes, we think the first question in an interview is, tell us a little bit about yourself. Oftentimes, I'm hearing first questions are, why us? Why did you apply to us? And so, again, you're going to need to be prepared to demonstrate and let them know why that nonprofit is unique, why it's important to you. And again, opportunity to talk about your passions. And so, I really think that is like one of the questions that you can help prepare. Again, use your resume. What are the top 3 or 4 snapshots that you can highlight yourself? Because you can really have a strengths-based approach to any of the answers that you're preparing. So as you're practicing, even if, depending on how they're asking, a lot of the questions are, why us? What community issue, what advocacy issue is most important to you? Why has working with this community group or this population been important to you? So again, you can demonstrate your values that way. But you'll also encounter behavioral questions, right? And so being able to use real examples, and to be able to emphasize that teamwork that Chaz mentioned, empathize, how you've utilized empathy and resilience. What are the lessons that you've learned? Again, being able to really reflect on some of the key takeaways from the jobs, your service that you've had. You're going to be able to interviewers are always looking for something very specific. And this goes back to being confident in your personal experiences. You have a lot of rich experiences, I'm sure, and just being able to practice, writing 2 or 3 sentences down and practice to yourself or to friends and family about what you're most proud of and how that can contribute to your next organization. I think that's the kind of generosity of spirit, curiosity of spirit that will help you thrive in the nonprofit sector. For sure, because a lot of questions are those behavioral questions. And then another subset of questions, I think, are going to be questions about how do you encounter working with limited resources? Again, so depending on your experiences of working with a large nonprofit or a small nonprofit, we're often asked to do a lot with very little. So you may be asked, how do you stay organized and prioritize when you have competing priorities? You might be asked with, a time that you solved a challenging problem. So having that snapshot of experience to talk about how you would use your critical thinking skills, your teamwork skills, your communication skills to solve a challenge. And it could be something that you didn't succeed in. Talking about, an experience that you had where I stopped and I reflected and I wish I would have done something differently is a very important skill set to say, hey, I can reflect and correct. Because we're not always going to be, perfect in our challenges. But if you are the type of candidate who can, demonstrate that, I think that goes into that skills base. You have the skills to be resilient and move along with the team. And so those would be the kinds of snapshots that I would say have prepared 3 or 4, and think about your strengths and what you want to highlight. Because again, you're creating a picture for them to see how you are going to fit with their mission and their culture at the nonprofit.
Love it, love it. All very good advice, and you'll need it throughout your career, I must say. So, thank you, Rosemary. And so, one last question, and this is for both of you, or one if one wants to answer, or both, that'd be great. But what are some of the most common challenges that students face while searching for jobs in today's market, and how do they overcome them? So, whoever wants to jump in on that.
I can go ahead and kick us off. Excuse me. I'd say just knowing where to start is tough for a lot of students. Because again, the nonprofit space is very different than the for-profit space. So you can't necessarily just hop on like Indeed, right? But I say all that to say, like, there are other resources if you're even looking to see what's out there, what's available. Nonprofit jobs. That's one that I used to use all the time. So I think just knowing where to start has been challenging for students. And I'll bring it back to I'll bring it back to what I said in my opening question is you want to get to know sort of what's around, start volunteering. I think that's going to be that's a great option just to see what you like. Is this what you want to do? Again, Rosemary, you mentioned that you may have already been organizing certain things at your university or your community, what have you. Continue that. Start volunteering, and that way you can start to see just exactly what type of organization you want to work for. And I think it's truly never too early to start. In fact, the earlier you can get started, whether it is with a volunteer opportunity or an internship opportunity, just to get to know organizations and what they are asking, I think that will help you to start to develop a clearer picture, of what you want. And through that clearer picture, your confidence is going to go up. You're going to know how to tell your resume. You're going to start to know exactly what you want. And because a lot of that lingo when you're applying is kind of the same. So you're going to get to know some of that as well. So I think just starting early, jump in the deep end. I'm a big fan of that. Jump in the deep end. There's nothing wrong with that. Get to know these organizations, go to resource fairs, go to where they are. I think there's nothing wrong with that. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable with this process. I think can kind of help you sort of go a long way in this world. So in this sector. So that would be kind of my unofficial advice there.
Good advice, yes.
Mhm. Uh, and I might just add, I liked everything that Chaz had to say around the challenges that students are facing with today's job market. I would also say that, sometimes nonprofits, looking for jobs, learning the lingo is something that made me think about, sometimes because depending on the size of the nonprofits, if it's large national organization or grassroots advocacy organization, sometimes students don't realize how nonprofits are operating and maybe don't know the types of roles that there are in nonprofits. And so like thinking about program management or was fundraising fun for you or the communication marketing and advocacy part, what part of the process are you an operations and an administration kind of person that wants to like focus in on the coordination, or do you like doing the research and policy and being able to like share that information out? And even to volunteer management. So there are a lot of skills, I think, in nonprofits that you can think about, and then that can help you narrow down your search as you're thinking about not only the organization, but your role and your contribution. Again, how that translates from your experiences now as a student can help you feel like you're really learning what the current appetite is and what's available for you to apply to. So that's one way that I'm, sort of thinking about one piece of advice that I'd help students with. And the other thing is to know that job searches these days are taking a lot longer than you expect. And that's okay. Start early, application cycles and nonprofits vary. And so that's why, starting early can even say, hey, is there, again, volunteer experience or oftentimes networking. So let's say, there isn't any immediate volunteer experience. Doing some outreach for a 15-minute, what we call informational interview, or sometimes we're calling them conversational, career conversation. Do a soft outreach to say, hey, I'd like to learn more about your organization. Do you have time? Networking beyond nonprofits is your key to relationship building and learning. Even in that 15-minute conversation, you'll learn more about, is this the direction, is the pathway that I want to continue, or is this do I need to look in a different direction? And optimally, if you do commit to some networking, that individual that you connect with can lead you to another connection. So, networking is really, I think, important during the job search, especially if you're not finding something exactly, you're not finding that next dream position, that you can still be, focusing on your career development, and then really building that professional network in the nonprofit space. Because I think for all of you out there, you're committed to building relationships. And so think of it as relationship building, and that'll help you kind of relax around this. Again, you can be doing a lot of different things while you're looking for work that are going to lend to you leading to the next that job that you really are looking for.
Love it, love it. So, really great advice from both of you. Thank you so much for sharing this with all the students. I know that this will be very helpful, and we will continue with Career Day. So, thank you again, Rosemary and Chaz.
Thank you.
Some common signs to look for when your mental health might be impacted or has shifted or is quite honestly deteriorating. There's a few, there's a bunch, but the few I'm going to focus on. The first one is to pay attention to, are you doing less of the things that actually bring you joy? If you are an active person, if you're somebody who plays sports with your friends, intramural sports, or goes to the gym, you do rock climbing, you do swimming, and you start to notice you're pulling away from these activities that light you up and make you feel the best, that is something to be aware of. That is a sign that, especially if it's hard to get back in that energy, that there may be some more support that you're going to need. Another sign I would say is if you are noticing yourself sleeping a lot more than you typically do. So college students, even post-college, average hours is anywhere between 7 and 9 hours. But if you're noticing on average, you're sleeping about 10 hours at night and then squeezing in naps throughout the day and still lacking energy, that is another sign that there could be something off. There's some other element in your life that is causing you to just want to rest and isolate and keep to yourself. Another thing that I would really encourage you to think about if you're noticing that your mental health is being impacted could also be procrastination. Now, all of us procrastinate. If you say you've never procrastinated, I'm going to look at you twice. But if you're noticing you are procrastinating, especially on things that you used to jump on right away, or if things that actually you enjoy, classes you enjoy, social events you enjoy, if you are procrastinating on following through with those and putting those on your calendar consistently, these are all signs between sleep, self-isolating, doing less of what you love, and increased procrastination that could be signs that your mental health could be impacted. When you are searching for jobs, either while you're still in school or after, you have got to remind yourself that you're enough, that you are showing up exactly the person you are in that moment, and that there's a reason you're applying for that job, even if you continue to get no's or hear nothing. The more you can mentally keep yourself strong and reminding yourself you are enough, reminding yourself of your talents, whether you are still an active undergrad, your gifts, the clubs you're involved in, the talents that you're showing up with, or if you're already graduated and you still remind yourself of these transferable skills that can go to many different roles. So when you remind yourself you're enough, you actually decrease the likelihood of keeping yourself in a box. Because if you go into the job application process very straight and focused on this is the job I'm going to have, and you have it perfectly cookie cuttered out, it's going to make it a bit more challenging. So I'm really going to encourage you to think about, am I too narrowly focused? Are you starting to feel rejected time and time again? And if you are, how are you really tapping into the full spectrum of your gifts and your talents? So reminding yourself that what you have, what you're showing up with is just enough. I would also say to protect your mental health during the application process, to make sure it is not all that you're doing, to keep a routine, to keep consistency in your life that is not just all applying to jobs. What are the other things that light you up? Who are the people in your life that you want to stay connected to? And this one might be a little bit outside the box to think about, but with loneliness being the new epidemic, you've got to train yourself to socially connect, to talk to people about what it is that you're interested in. How is anyone going to know what fields, what work, what curiosities you have if you are not actually expressing that? And I don't suggest everybody knowing your business, everybody knowing what your plans are, but be selective, pay attention to who, whether they're connected, they're a mentor, who can you share maybe your challenges, and who might be able to put you in front of the right people. No one's going to know that unless you open your mouth and share. So that's the other tip I would say to keep yourself motivated during a very challenging process. So let's talk the importance of setting goals and, more importantly, a tip to stay focused on. The first tip I'd like to share is for you to think of yourself backwards. So whatever job, career, whatever the next move is, think about when you're setting your goal, who is the person you want to be if it's a goal that's 3 months from now, a year from now, or 5 years from now? What about you do you want to change, to shift, to expand, to grow? What transferable skills are you just like, man, I'm okay at this, but I would really love to be like a master at this. So really think about yourself as not just let me set a goal to make X amount of money or be in this position or lead this project. How do you actually want to change? How are these goals going to fundamentally change the human being you are so that 1 year from now you'll be different? So think about it that way, reverse it. Think about it as far as skills and growth and how you're going to be stretched when you're setting some of these goals. Another, and we've all heard this, SMART goals, keep them realistic. As someone who has coached hundreds of people, who now teaches in a college classroom, I have overachieving professionals and students that I deal with every single week who set goals all the way up here when they know all these other elements in their life are competing with reaching it. So do not set yourself up to be annoyed at yourself. Set a goal, even if it's tiny. The success and the applause you'll give yourself for succeeding at it. So keep the goals realistic. Keep them realistic. And I actually want to leave you with some resources that help me. Continuing to work on the health and the strength of the mind makes all of these other things just feel like less of a grip. Alan Watts is a philosopher who I have re-engaged in my life. So if you are a YouTube person, I would suggest typing in Alan Watts philosophy. If you're someone that likes to be in your head, to think about words to help you get a little more focused, great resource. I would also, Stoicism is something I'm speaking to a lot. Stoic philosophy speaks to you have control over you and no one else. So when you're rooted in who you are and what you have to do, distractions, taking things personally, they fall off the wayside. So understanding Stoicism. There's an author, Nidra Tawwab, who writes about boundaries. I believe that the book is called Set Boundaries, Find Peace, another great resource. And the last one is a book called Atomic Habits. All of these resources help you control kind of your mind and what you are in control of, which makes a lot of setting goals, seeking your career, and protecting your mental health a lot easier to do.